Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Brie Myself and God channel, where I'm bringing you all things Brie and all things God. And it has been such a minute since I've gotten a chance to say that to y'all. I'm so excited to be back with another video. I've been doing my thing in the shorts and in the IG videos and reels and everything, so I hope you're following me on Instagram and TikTok at Brie Myself and God. But I'm still committed to bringing you long form content that gets more into the depth, more into the meat of the material, you feel me? So thank you for tuning in, and without further ado, let's get into the topic for today. So today I want to talk about relationships, and specifically I want to talk about 5 types of people that God will remove from your life before he elevates you. And I'm pulling this straight from my own personal experience over about the last 5 years, possibly more, but especially the last 5 years. I have gone through some major shedding and rearranging in the area of my relationships. Like, God has really removed some people and also added some other people back in that are more compatible with what he's trying to do in my life. And in hindsight, it's so clear exactly why certain people had to go. And I'm noticing that people fit into a certain category. So I want to just tell you, what are some of the types of people that God might remove from your life? And then if you really learn this well, you might be able to do some of the removing for yourself, so God don't have to. Okay. So without further ado, let's get into it. Number 1. The first type of person that God might need to remove from your life when he is trying to elevate you is the leech or the vampire type. So this is the type of person that is pulling on you and drawing way more out of you than what they're depositing back in. Because relationships are supposed to be built on reciprocity. So especially in friendships, we're supposed to show up for each other. I'm there for you, you're there for me. One thing that I noticed is that one of the main relationships that I lost during the last 5 years, that was one of my closest, when I took a step back and looked at it, it wasn't even a loss, because that relationship was draining from me. I was always pouring out. I was always encouraging. I was always uplifting. And that's not a problem. I love to do those things. But when you look at the proportion to which I was pouring it out and the proportion to which it was being poured back into me, it was very unequal. And it was ultimately not a value add. And so if you have relationships in your life that are like that, sometimes it is okay to tolerate that for a season. Sometimes it's okay to be willing to pour out. We all go through our ups and downs. But if it's a constant through the relationship that they are a drain on your capacity, an emotional drain, an energy drain, a mental drain, that might be somebody that ultimately needs to go, or at least be removed from the friend category. Because there are relationships in your life where you are supposed to be pouring out, more than they pour into you. That would be a mentorship relationship, a ministry relationship, a counseling relationship if you're a professional. But that is not a friendship. That is not supposed to be how a friendship is all the time. So if that's how a friendship is, that might be one that needs to go. Number 2, the jealous/competitive types, y'all. The people who are really frenemies, and the reason they are keeping you close to them is because they see you as competition and they're intimidated by you. And this one was really new for me, because when I was growing up and I was in high school, if I ever had beef with some girl at school, the first thing my grandma would say is, "They're jealous of my Brie." And I'd be like, "Grandma, just because I got beef with somebody, just because somebody doesn't like me, it doesn't mean they're jealous." Like, I was never quick to assume somebody was jealous of me. But then, like 5 years ago, I had a relationship where for the first time I was like, wait a minute. It really feels like this person who is supposed to be a friend of mine is literally in competition. It would come out in the comments they would make. They even sometimes, in the name of vulnerability, admitted it. Like, admitted feeling like I was kind of so far ahead, admitted those things. And then it would come out in these slide comments that tried to make it off like they were better than me or different things like that. Or that I thought I was better, which I didn't. Those are subtle signs that somebody really might see you as competition, not a friend. And you really can't have people around you who are trying to compete with you, because that is a top tier risk that they might try to sabotage you. And you do not want anybody around you who doesn't want the best for you, because they don't want to see you doing better than them. So that's somebody else that might have to go when God is trying to elevate you, because especially when you're in a season of elevating, that is going to intimidate and scare people who are the jealous types, and they might try to interfere with what God is doing in your life. And we can't have that. Our callings are too important and tied to touching too many lives to let it go down like that. So the jealous types, they gotta go. The next kind of person that God might remove is the gossiper, the messy type, okay? Listen, I know that in our culture, we talk about loving the tea, and sometimes it's fun to talk about the latest celebrity gossip or whatever. Celebrities, that's one thing. But when it comes to actually being around people who will talk about their family, talk about their friends, talk about their associates, talk about the people in their lives, if they're a gossipy type, you really got to watch out for them, because don't think for a second that they're gossiping to you, but they won't be gossiping about you. And see, me, I'm not a gossipy type of person. So the people in my life really didn't gossip with me and didn't gossip around me, but I found out the hard way that some people were gossiping about me. I had somebody that I considered a friend, but I found out they were saying all type of stuff about me to somebody else who was also supposed to be my friend. And it was incredibly hurtful. My heart was really hurt. And that is the reason why you have to watch out for gossipy type of people, because 9 times out of 10, you might not even hear the things they say about you. It might not get back to you. But then if and when it does, it can be heartbreaking. It can be crippling. It can really affect how you view yourself, because it's one thing for somebody who's over there and is a hater to say something about you. But it's another thing for somebody who you thought was a friend and who you have allowed yourself to become vulnerable or sensitive to what they think or say about you, to be somebody who is speaking death over you. I found out that somebody who I thought was a friend was saying, it's annoying how I promote my videos and send them to my friends when I post them. That's because when I started my YouTube channel, I would share my videos with my friends like, hey, I posted a YouTube video, thinking it's all love, it's all support. Meanwhile, I got a friend like, it's annoying, or oh, Bree overdoes it when she talks about her accomplishments, whatever. That's giving hater vibes. That's giving gossipy vibes, and you don't want that in your circle. You want people who are going to celebrate you and say the same thing to you that they would say when you're not around. And you also got to watch out for the people who will tolerate somebody gossiping about you, because I allowed the friend who told me about the person gossiping about me to remain in my life without fully processing the fact that, well, if you were tolerating and taking in all that gossip, then you either were an active participant or at the very least you were letting it slide. And I tried to call it out, but I didn't draw the boundary where I really removed that person from my life. And that came back to bite me. That person ended up falling in the next category of people that got removed, which is what I'm gonna call the rotten apples. People that are not good at their core. And I was like trying to find a better word to describe this, because it's like, okay, let's not use kindergarten words, they're not good people. But that's really what it is. People who do not have integrity. That's what we're gonna call this. People without integrity. People who are two-faced, because you get one version of them in one situation and another version of them in another situation. Ideally, now we all have our ways that we can be when somebody tries us. But ideally, there is some consistency to our character. Whether I like you, whether I don't like you, whether you get on my nerves, whether you don't, you're not going to get certain behavior out of me, because it's just not a part of who I am. If you have friends or people around you who are one way with you while you're on their good side, but you see how they treat other people who get on their bad side, and it's very destructive, it's very toxic, it's very unkind, they're just not above stooping really low in how they treat other people, watch out for that, because that might come back in how they treat you. And that's what happened to me. I allowed somebody to be in my life who was decent in their behavior towards me, but they told me, oh yeah, I just did some destructive stuff. Or I watched them go back and forth in toxic arguments with other people. I watched them be toxic towards other people, but I called myself not judging them. I called myself accepting them. And then sure enough, when I finally realized that I needed to pull back from that relationship, they got mad toxic towards me. I became the target of their toxic and venomous and vitriolic behavior. And if I had just had the discernment to see that if they're willing to turn that on someone else, they'll turn it on me, then I probably would have not even allowed myself to get that close to that person. So if you're dealing with somebody who's two-faced, or who is a rotten apple in the sense that they can look good on the outside, but at their core, they don't have that character that's solid to the core, either God is gonna have to remove them or you're gonna have to remove them. But one way or another, they gotta go, because you cannot take somebody like that with you when you're elevating to the places that God is taking you. Oh, and the one thing I'll say about the person who is rotten to their core, it'll probably come out in little ways. And so you have to pay attention to the little signs, right? they may not straight up be cussing you out. They may not be straight up trying to put you down in the middle of your friendship because they're still keeping up that facade. But it might come out in little rude comments. It might come out in them being rough around the edges towards you. And pay attention, because sometimes those are the signs about how they really feel about you. So that was another thing with that person. Like, yeah, I wasn't super aware of the specifics of how they were mistreating others, but I was seeing signs even in our own interactions that should have told me to go the other way, and I didn't. And I ended up getting deeply, deeply hurt as a result. And I just don't want y'all to go through that. So hear me out, pay attention to their character, and remove them if it's not up to par. So last but not least, God is going to remove people whose demons clash with your deliverance. So what does that mean? That's a little bit of Christianese. So anybody that's not a church folk, I can break it down for you real quick. Salvation is God taking us out of hell, freeing us from, being on our way to hell. Deliverance is God taking the hell out of us. So taking out, the evil spirits, the things, the aspects of our character or our personality that are really not like God, and they're not a part of the way God made us to be, but maybe we picked it up through trauma. Maybe we picked it up through poor examples or bad influences and things of that nature. And so when God is pulling that out of you, that's called deliverance. But then sometimes you have friends or even, situationships or romantic relationships in your life where their demons that they're battling with directly pull you back in the direction that God is trying to pull you out of. And so I'm going to give 2 examples of that this has manifested in my life. One of the main things that God has been continually delivering me from is lust, engaging with people in relationships where it's just not pure in the way that I feel called to engage my sexuality. I am waiting until marriage for sex. And so one of the things that happened early on in my walk of God, kind of purging the relationships in my life, is I had to get disconnected from somebody who was a trap in the area of lust. It was a guy that I knew. We were technically just friends, but there was clearly chemistry. There was clearly attraction. And it was clear that he was the type of person that if he had the opportunity, it was going down with me. And that's a trap. That's a trap. And so out of loneliness or out of boredom or out of just wanting to be entertained and have somebody to hang out with, it was tempting for me to still keep that friendship around, or just to feel like, oh, it's a valuable friendship, or, we get along, we have fun, not recognizing. But his demon was clashing with an area where I was being delivered. And so I had to get clear that I had to let go of that and disconnect from that. And it ended up being a whole process, because even though I didn't let anything happen between us physically, emotionally, I had already gotten entangled, and I ended up having to disentangle myself. And so that's one way that can happen. But even on a friendship level, there's ways that people's demons can clash with your deliverance, because you might have friends that have the habits that are the exact type of thing that you're trying to get out of, that they're continually doing and celebrating and promoting and telling you about all these things they're doing that are the opposite of what you feel called to do. You feel called to walk away from that, to walk out of that, but they're steady in it and they're entrenched. Now, this is not to say to judge. This is not to say you cannot be friends with anybody that has a different lifestyle than you, but it's to say you want to be careful about how close people are to be able to have influence on you. Because if they're close enough to have influence over you and their demons clash with your deliverance, one of the two is going to be compromised, and it's most likely going to be your deliverance, not their demons, because we have more power over demons after we're delivered. So once I'm delivered from something and it's no longer a stronghold or area of struggle for me, then I'll be better able to influence somebody else who's battling that demon. But I can't be trying to influence you to battle the demon and overcome it when I'm still overcoming it, because at that point, you're probably more likely to pull me back than I am to pull you forward. So if somebody else's demons clash with your deliverance, God might have to remove that relationship. So those are it, y'all. Those are the 5 types of people God may have to remove when he's elevating you. Again, it's the leeches and the vampires, the jealous and competitive types, aka the frenemies, the gossiper and the messy type, the rotten apples or the two-faced people without integrity, and the people whose demons clash with your deliverance. If God is removing those people from your life, just let it go. Next, I just want to tell you a couple things to do, 5 things to do quickly to cooperate with that transformation process in the area of your relationships. 1, end those relationships expeditiously so God doesn't have to. If you will proactively end those types of relationships, then you don't gotta rely on God snatching them out of your life. The way God might do it, it might end up being, I remember when I recognized the relationships were not healthy for me, but I kept them in my life, and then the way that they ended up being drama, messy, hurtful. I'm not saying that's God's fault, but sometimes God has to rip you out of a situation because you won't walk out of it. So if you will end it expeditiously, it might be less painful than if God has to swoop in and snatch your butt up out of there. And okay, number 2 is love yourself enough to not tolerate toxicity in the name of loving or accepting somebody else. When I was dealing with toxic relationships, one of my downfalls was I wanted to accept them and keep them in my life in the name of not judging them, in the name of loving them, in the name of accepting them. But the question is not just, do you love them? The question is, do you love yourself enough to demand better? And so I had to love myself enough to demand better. And I want to encourage you to love yourself enough to demand better and to remove what is not up to the standards of what you want in your life and relationships. Number 3, this is on the front end, on the prevention end. Once you get rid of relationships that didn't belong, you have to work on increasing the barriers to entry for people to even get in your life when they are not up to par for being a relationship that is close to you. So basically, you got to increase your security system. You got to check people at the door. You got to pat them down, okay? You got to be figuring out on the front end, is this somebody that should be in my life? And for me, one of my downfalls with this was if somebody was intentional with me and they pursued me as a friend, then I immediately would pursue them back. I immediately would embrace them as a friend. Like, oh, they're pursuing me, as if that's enough. But my best friend told me, like, there has to be a higher barrier of entry. Somebody pursuing you means that they choose you, but you still have to have your own process to determine whether you choose them. Let intentionality be the floor, not the gold standard. Intentionality means they're getting an interview. It does not mean they're getting the job. You have to figure out whether that intentionality also ties in with them being a right fit for your purpose in life to be in your relationship. And then when you're increasing the barriers to entry and when you are accepting that some relationships need to end, there might be a season of loneliness or feeling like you don't have as many friends in your life during that time as you're used to. I went through that. Some of the friends that I lost were people who I used to talk to every day throughout the day. So when those friendships were gone, it was a lot of silence. It felt a little empty in a way. But that really was a time for me to lean on my relationship with God. So that's what I would encourage. When you let go of that situationship, when you let go of those friendships that are not serving you, it might feel a little lonely, but use that to build your intimacy with God and your relationship with Him. And it will pay dividends in the future because that will become your foundation and your core. So then in the future, no matter who comes and no matter who goes, you have that solid relationship between you and God that's not going nowhere. And then last but not least, as you're doing that, trust that God will replace whatever value you think you're missing by removing those people from your life or not letting certain people into your life. Trust that God will replace it. I once heard a word that said, God might not give you the thing back, but He will give you the thing that the thing gave you. So even though might not get that friend back and you don't need or want them back, the joy or the laughter or the companionship or the things that you got out of those relationships that maybe you miss or maybe you wish that you could still have, God can get that back to you. He can get that back to you through true friends who want the best for you, who see the best in you, who love you well, people who are growing like you and moving in a similar direction as you. It may take some time. It may take some intentionality to put yourself in spaces with people who share your values. But if you're intentional and you trust God and wait on God, I believe that He will do that for you. He will make your life one that is full of healthy and life-giving relationships. So that's all I got for y'all. Thank you so much for tuning in. I wish you all the best in the ways that God is transforming your life from the inside out, in your spirit and your relationships and in everything in between. And I will see you next time. Bye.